If I hadn't walked out to check my mailbox that morning, I might never have discovered Karen's outrageous scheme to steal my swimming pool. I live at the end of a peaceful cul-de-sac inside a gated neighborhood, the kind of place where life usually drifts along quietly. It's a calm street where dogs bark at passing sprinklers, where folks wave at each other while pushing lawnmowers, and where the biggest drama is when the recycling bins get knocked over. Normal. Predictable. Until Karen moved in 2 doors down. At first, she gave the impression of being friendly enough. She showed up on my porch with a tray of cookies that tasted like cardboard and made a not-so-subtle comment about how my hedges looked a little wild. Passive-aggressive, sure, but not unbearable. I brushed it off. That is, until one sweltering Saturday afternoon when she appeared again, this time armed with a clipboard and a smile that looked like it belonged on a used car salesman. "We need access to your pool," she chirped, as if she were asking for a cup of flour. "It's going to be a community amenity from now on." I froze. "Come again?" She explained, or at least pretended to explain, that as a newly elected member of the HOA board, she had already voted for my backyard pool to be designated for neighborhood use during weekends. According to her, it would build stronger community ties and raise property values. I couldn't help it. I laughed right in her face. "That's not how this works. That pool is on my deeded land. It's not community anything." Her smile fell away instantly, her expression souring into something far more aggressive. "I'm afraid you'll need to comply or the board will have no choice but to take further action." That's when it hit me. This wasn't a casual request. It was a demand. I said no firmly and shut the door in her face. The next morning, my patience was tested again. A notice was taped to my mailbox, neatly printed and labeled Community Pool Use Schedule, with my address listed under Facility A. My blood boiled. I stormed straight to her house, shoved the paper in her direction, and demanded she take it down. She just smirked and said, "We'll see what the law says." That evening, while grilling burgers in my backyard, I caught 2 kids I'd never seen before trying to climb over my pool fence. I shouted at them to get down, and one yelled back, "Karen said we could swim here." That's when I realized she wasn't going to stop. The following day, my doorbell rang, and it wasn't the trespassers being held accountable. It was the police. 2 officers stood on my porch, serious expressions on their faces. One flipped. "Open a notepad." "Mr. Daly?" the taller one asked. "Yes?" "We've received a report about an incident with neighborhood children. Do you mind if we come inside?" I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. "I'd rather we talk here." "What incident?" He read from his notes. "A resident named Karen claims you yelled at kids and made threatening gestures while they were using the community pool." I stared at him. "You mean my pool? The one behind a locked gate on private property?" The second officer frowned and glanced at his partner. "She didn't mention that." I walked them around back and pointed. Out the locked fence, the no trespassing signs, and the security camera mounted above my garage. Then, to make it crystal clear, I pulled up the camera footage on my phone. Video of the 2 kids climbing my fence while Karen stood on the sidewalk, watching silently. The officers exchanged a look, and one let out a sigh. "Mr. Daly, we're sorry to bother you. With this footage and the property boundaries, there's no crime here. If anything, you've got a trespassing case." "Good," I said. "Can I press charges?" They explained it would be difficult since the children were minors and probably acting on someone else's word, but they promised to file a report. Before leaving, one of the officers gave me some advice. "If she keeps pushing, start documenting everything. She's testing you." That night, I took his advice. I installed a second camera aimed at the sidewalk and printed out a copy of my property survey to keep by the door. The very next morning, Karen was standing in my driveway, clipboard in hand like some kind of power-hungry official. She didn't even flinch when I walked out holding the survey papers. "I've notified the HOA of your non-compliance," she announced coldly. "We're holding an emergency meeting this week. If you don't show up, We'll interpret that as surrender of rights. I laughed out loud. That's not how property law works. Her eyes narrowed into slits. She took a step closer and hissed, "You'll regret this. The neighborhood wants that pool." I said nothing, just stared her down until she turned and stomped away. But her warning echoed in my head. She wasn't backing off. She was gearing up. 3 days later, the so-called emergency HOA meeting was held, in her living room, of course. I almost skipped it, but after the stunt she pulled with the cops, I wasn't about to let her spin the story without me there. The moment I stepped inside, it felt like a staged circus. The room was crammed wall to wall. Karen sat in the center, like she was queen of the cul-de-sac, with 3 board members slouched on the couch, clearly uncomfortable. Folding chairs were lined up along the walls, filled with curious neighbors and Karen's cheerleaders, people who had obviously been prepped ahead of time. Karen stood dramatically as I entered, gesturing toward me like I was some villain in her play. Mr. Daly has decided to join us." I ignored the jab and took an empty chair. Without wasting a second, she launched into a speech about underutilized resources. She paced back and forth like some bargain bin motivational speaker, declaring, "In these times of rising costs and limited facilities, it is only fair that all residents have equal access to shared assets, such as the community pool." I raised my hand. "There is no community pool. You're talking about my private property." Karen didn't even blink. "A resource unused is a resource wasted. You only swim in it, what, twice a week? We're suggesting a fair use rotation for weekends and holidays. You'll even be compensated with reduced HOA dues." The room stirred. Some neighbors nodded thoughtfully, others looked confused, and a few just avoided eye contact altogether. I stood up, pulled the folded property survey from my folder, and held it in the air for everyone to see. Let me be absolutely clear. My pool sits on a parcel of land that belongs exclusively to me. It is not under HOA jurisdiction. You can't vote to take it, you can't schedule it, and you certainly can't set foot near it without my consent. Karen gave a sharp laugh, though it rang hollow. "You're being unreasonable. This isn't about ownership. It's about community spirit." "No," I shot back, firm and steady. "This is about you trying to control something that doesn't belong to you." For the first time, one of the board members spoke up. "Karen, maybe we need to review the bylaws before we push forward with anything." That's when Karen lost it. "Are you seriously siding with him? He yelled at children. He installed cameras. He's acting like some paranoid recluse." I couldn't help but smile. "And you filed a false police report. Want me to read the case number out loud?" The room fell silent. Karen's face turned crimson. She clutched her clipboard like it was a weapon and stormed into the kitchen. Meeting over. But I wasn't naive enough to celebrate. People like Karen don't quit when they lose. They double down. For several days, things were oddly calm. No notes taped to my mailbox, no ambushes in my driveway, not even her yappy little dog howling on her porch. But I knew that silence wasn't peace. It was plotting. I kept every camera rolling, checked the footage daily, and even started locking the pool gate, a habit I'd never needed before. My gut told me she was waiting for her chance. It came on a Sunday afternoon while I was across town at my brother's barbecue. My phone buzzed with a motion alert at 3:17 p.m. I assumed it was a stray cat or raccoon until I opened the feed. My heart stopped. Karen was in my backyard. She had climbed my fence, scraping her leg in the process, and was now wandering around, snapping photos of my pool, the deck, even the pump system. She strutted around like she was cataloging evidence for a trial. Then she tried my back door, locked, of course. Finally, she turned toward the camera and gave a slow, deliberate smile. I raced home. By the time I pulled into my driveway, she was gone. But the muddy footprints on my deck and the busted fence latch told the story loud and clear. I called the police immediately. This time I wasn't asking about charges. I was demanding them. The officers arrived, reviewed the footage, and took my full statement. When Karen's face appeared on the video, one of them even whistled. "Well," he said, "this is definitely trespassing. She also attempted unlawful entry. That's serious. I handed over everything, the footage, the timeline, even the scrape marks on the fence post where she'd torn her khakis. They told me they'd be following up with her directly and strongly recommended I file for a restraining order." That night, I sat on my patio with a cold drink, scrolling through my laptop when Karen had the nerve to stroll past with her dog. She locked eyes with me, pausing as if daring me to react. I didn't flinch. Instead, I held up my phone, flashed the camera footage, and said loud enough for her to hear, "Nice pants. Hope you kept the receipt." She stormed off without a word. But I knew this wasn't the end. 2 days later, a certified letter from the HOA board landed in my mailbox. Karen had filed an official petition to have my pool declared a community asset, and she'd even gathered signatures. The letter was almost funny if it hadn't been so brazen. The petition claimed that due to the pool's size, location, and potential benefit to nearby residents, it should be designated as a neighborhood resource. 10 names were attached. I recognized 2 of them, people who barely left their homes. The rest? Karen's poker buddies. One didn't even live in the community anymore. It was a desperate grab for control, but she had just handed me all the ammunition I needed. That morning, I made 2 phone calls, one to my lawyer, the other to the county zoning office. Then I got to work building my case. I pulled together everything: the trespassing footage, the police report, Karen's fake HOA meeting minutes, and copies of every single complaint she'd filed against me. All of them dismissed. My lawyer was thrilled. "One of the cleanest cases I've ever seen," he said. When the official HOA hearing rolled around, it was a completely different atmosphere than Karen's living room circus. This was held in the community clubhouse with all 5 board members present and the HOA's actual attorney seated at the head table. Karen strutted in like a TV lawyer, wearing a blazer and carrying a fat binder, ready to perform. She launched into a speech about unity, about wasted resources, about how I was hoarding luxury in a time of community need. She went on, grandstanding as if she were auditioning for a courtroom drama. When she finally finished, I calmly handed each board member a folder. Inside were the security videos, the police report, photos of the fence damage, and a signed affidavit from my property attorney confirming that my pool was completely outside HOA authority. And then I dropped the hammer. "I've also filed a formal complaint with the county zoning board," I said evenly, "for attempted illegal reclassification of private residential property." The room froze. The HOA's attorney cleared his throat and said flatly, "This meeting is over. Mr. Daly is fully within his rights. Karen, please remain afterward." Karen exploded. She screamed at the board, accused them of cowardice, said I'd sabotaged her vision. She tried to storm out, only to be stopped by the HOA's attorney, who calmly informed her that she was being removed from the board, effective immediately, for abuse of power, misuse of resources, and filing fraudulent complaints. And just like that, Karen was finished. Since then, peace has returned. No kids scaling my fence, no notices taped to my mailbox, no more fake HOA drama. 2 weeks later, Karen's house went up for sale. These days, I still swim twice a week, just like before. But now I've added one more ritual. Every time I walk past her old house, I give a friendly little wave to the for sale sign. If you've ever had to deal with a power-tripping neighbor or a nightmare HOA like Karen, you know exactly how sweet that victory feels. Got a story of your own? Drop it in the comments. I read them all. And if you want more real-life revenge tales and satisfying takedowns, make sure to subscribe. Because trust me, you won't believe what happened when Karen tried to come back one last time.